I came from a family of entrepreneurs, born and bred an entrepreneur. I was doing sales, door to door, drawings at 2 for 25 cents. Nowadays, I don't think I would let my 2-year-old go door to door to the neighbors, but different world back then. Doing anything under the sun. Lemonade stands, snow cone sales, washing cars, walking dogs, literally was in business all the time. I loved it. When I found my love for design, I knew I wanted a design studio, I wanted to work for myself, I wanted to control how that looked. When I went to college, I got a minor in entrepreneurship and small business management. When I graduated undergrad, I worked for a contractor doing design build. Now, working for a contractor was amazingly helpful because I was learning details and the ins and outs of the architectural world through the eyes of a contractor, which was so invaluable. And I recommend every architect work for a contractor to get that perspective, costs, how a project is run, and communication. It was really helpful. We were working on design build, which was starting to build my own portfolio. I was the lead designer, working with clients, working with budgets, working with schedules that were allowing me to see what it was going to be like in the future. This was 2013. Then in 2015, I went to get my master's in architecture. And at the same time, which it's funny seeing the dates because it was January of 2015 I started my master's. February of 2015 I applied for my business license for Be Young Design. I started Be Young Design a month into grad school. I had been doing design build for a little while. I had been working for an interior designer for years before that, and I had worked for contractor doing more business side of things even before that. I decided that I wanted to get my business license so I could just get the ball rolling. I could start taking on really small projects. I could start working on branding. I could start creating a face for what this company was that I wanted to create. I was still working for the construction company doing design build. I also got a job working for an architect. It was a small architecture firm. We were working on really incredible projects, a lot bigger than what I was used to, commercial, mixed use, resorts and sky rises. My heart was in residential, but it was really fun to work on projects like that. I worked those two places while I was in school. When I was in school, I started getting small jobs under Be Young Design. Sounds like a lot because it was, but my plan was eventually start my firm. I figured after I graduated from my master's, I would go work for an architecture firm for maybe like 2 to 4 years and get all that experience. During that time, work on my licensing, and then get licensed and go out on my own. Now, things changed a little bit because my last year of grad school, I got pregnant, which is wonderful because I was planning on going to work for another firm for a couple of years, but I had this 5-month-old, and the idea of now leaving her to work for a firm, I knew that starting out in architecture, it would be long hours. The pay isn't great when you're starting off. What I was making working for myself versus elsewhere, plus daycare, added hours, and flexibility just did not make sense. Having my daughter allowed me the flexibility to stay on my own. In the beginning, a lot of times I would feel like, okay, what am I doing? Because when you're working for yourself, there's ebbs and flows. So when I would be at a low point where not a lot of work was coming in, I was like, I should just go work for another firm. I could have stability at least. Like every 2 weeks, I would get a paycheck. Where when you're working for yourself, there's not necessarily that stability. Like some months or weeks are really great, but then some months aren't good. And then you're spending a lot of time trying to get jobs that you're not getting. So there's unpaid work, marketing, meeting potential clients, stuff that's not billable. I would often come to this crossroads. Should I work for someone else? And in the end, I would always say, no, I know I'm going to get there. And each year I would do a little bit better, a little bit better. I had flexibility to be with my daughter. I ended up passing the last ARE in November 2019, and that definitely did make a big difference in my company. The projects I started out on were not your dream projects necessarily. It could be easy to be deterred in the beginning when you have these grand ideas of what type of architect you want to be and what type of designs you want to do. And maybe they're these grand designs and then you're starting off doing a deck or a bathroom remodel. It can feel discouraging at first. And with anything, with the project typologies, with income, with mistakes that are made along the way, there's so many times where you will want to feel like it would be easier to give up. That it would be easier just to stop what you're doing, go work for someone else, put all that stress and pressure on someone else's shoulders. Starting a business, especially in architecture, takes perseverance, optimism, and knowing it will be worth it. Know that there will be highs and lows some months coming up where maybe no clients are coming in. But here's the thing too, is when you work for someone else, there are always just as many unexpected situations, if not more, because say the company needs to drop employees because they don't have an income to be able to sustain everyone. Well, if you're an employee, then you're going to get cut. If you're the owner, likely you could fire everybody else and keep yourself on in order to keep things going. So although you may be really stressed out and trying to figure it out, there's more stability running the company. There's other things like, how I said earlier, getting your paycheck every 2 weeks. Yeah, that's predictable. However, the growth and the raises that are there are limited. Of course, there's growth. Of course, there's all sorts of potential there. However, it's usually capped. With running your own company, you do get hit when you don't have projects coming in. If you have people working for you, it's terrible to feel like now I have to let someone go or you can't pay payroll. But when you're profitable, profits go into the company and back to you. So there are pros and cons of starting your own business versus working for someone else. Not everyone is meant to be entrepreneurs and business owners. If we were, society wouldn't function properly because everyone would be a business owner and you wouldn't have anyone to work for you. I think there's a right position for everybody. Running a business is, especially in architecture, is a lot because you have to wear a lot of hats. You have to be an architect, you have to be a politician, a graphic designer. I could go on and on and on. Marketing, business, an accountant, all these things. Once you get established, you can start hiring, which is the goal. But I think it's important to know that a lot of architects just want to be designing. They don't really want to be dealing with all this other stuff. And sometimes when you're the business owner, the last thing you're doing is designing, or that's just one tiny piece of the puzzle. So it's a really important thing for people who are wanting to start their own company. Remember, it isn't all glitz and glam. What you see from the outside is a tiny piece of what goes on behind the scenes. It might not be for you, but that's okay. You can always try it out and see.